Today's webinar is hosted by FlowForma Process Automation, and my name is Ursula Cullen, and I'm the Events Manager here at FlowForma. I'll be your host for today. We have a great webinar planned for you all, and you'll hear from our panel of speakers as they discuss digitalisation and how the College of Paramedics of Nova Scotia created a flexible registrant management database. Now, as I mentioned, we have a brilliant array of speakers joining us today. As you can see, we have 4 brilliant individuals that are going to share their experiences with digitizing and process automation. And to get started, I would love for each and every one of those individuals to share just something quick about themselves, just to introduce themselves to our audience today. So Carl, if we could kick off with you, that would be brilliant.
Great, thanks, Ursula. So my name is Carl Kowalczyk. I'm the Executive Director and Registrar with the College of Paramedics of Nova Scotia. Come from a bit of a diverse background. I am a paramedic by profession. I used to be an Army Reservist as well, and I happen to be fortunate enough to manage an educational institution at one point in time.
Brilliant, thank you, Carl. And Nicole, welcome today. How are you? If you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks so much, Ursula. My name is Nicole Webb, and I'm the administrative coordinator here for the college. I have a pretty interesting background. I'm not a paramedic, just greatly appreciate them. However, I do have a background in some research and statistics, so really excited to share what we have to talk to you guys about today.
Great, thank you, Nicole. And Rick, how are you? Welcome to today's webinar. If you would love to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, Ursula. Thank you. My name is Rick Dowell. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Pontem Innovations. And Pontem Innovations is focused on helping organizations utilize their data more effectively. And we do that through data analytics and process automation. And we're a partner with FlowForma and excited to talk about some of the work we've done with CPNS with you today.
Great. Thank you, Rick. And last but certainly not least, Lana, hope you're doing well today. If you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, thank you. My name is Lana. I'm a Business Solutions Manager at Pontem Innovations. My background is in project management and continuous improvement, and I've been working very closely with Carl and Nicole to implement and evolve their registrant management database.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. So yes, as I said, we have a brilliant panel of speakers joining us today, and we are going to get started with the content. So Rick, I will pass over to you to share your screen and we will kick off.
Great. Well, I'm going to start today by just setting a little bit of the stage around what we're going to talk about, why it is that that Pontem and CPNS have been working together for over 2 years now, and then we'll dive into some of the details and show you the system. But I want to just talk about current state and the way that we talk about databases, especially in our regulatory college environment. And so when we talk about databases, a database is really a place where you store information. And so when you think about it we often think about it in this simplistic form around we input data, it gets stored in a database, and then as needed, we can go into the database and pull out the information as required. And so in practice, this is true, especially if you look back 5-10 years, there was a lot of discussion around forms and how do you get stuff into the database. And once it's in there, we can go in maybe the odd time and adjust it if required. We'll have some edit capability, but that's sort of the extent of it. And what we know is that in practice, the interaction between the registrant and the college is much more complex. It's much more fluid than that. It's not as simple as, we're going into Amazon and we're going to order something. We're going to click a couple pieces of something we want from the kitchen aisle, right? It's much more complex in terms of the workflow and process and how that can change depending on where the registrant's at, what's the situation that they're coming into. And the college is required to respond to that and have processes and workflow to manage that. And so not only is the interaction with the registrant, the interaction is also within the internal college around how do you manage that? How do we make sure that all the boxes are ticked, we have the information we need, and that we're able to do this in an administratively efficient way? And so that was sort of the crux of how we started talking with the College of Paramedics to be like, I think there's a better way. And I want to touch on some of the regulatory college pain points that we hear often from our clients. And so one is just that databases can be quite rigid, and that's the nature of them, right? That box is, hey, we're going to put information in. you put in this form and it's going to be stored here, and that's the way it is. But as stakeholders require different information, and those can be external or internal stakeholders. It can be things like a board for the college. It could be the government. It could be a wide variety of people asking for something different. Well, how do you adapt? How do you manage that? And so with that rigidity, came a lot of high IT and database costs. There's a lot of static reporting that isn't very flexible, because often when people see data, there's a follow-on question around, well, oh, that's interesting. What about this? How easily can you get that information out of the database or get that to the interested stakeholder? There can be challenges just in getting timely responses from different stakeholders and providers. And a big one is the lack of clarity of who owns the data. And so we'll say just up front, in the system we have, the data is owned by the College of Paramedics in Nova Scotia. It's on their system. There is no gray area on that. The data is owned by the college and they can do whatever they need with it at any point in time. And then the other piece is just around that workflow. When you don't have that nuance available to you, you end up spending a lot of time on the processes. And in some cases with regulatory colleges, sometimes they're even on paper, but the processes can take a very long time. So those are some of the pain points that we've heard, and what we're going to talk about today and show you is just some of the ways that we've been able to address these issues and create something that's I think a little bit more not only flexible, user-friendly, and utilizing the tools that are available, from a digital transformation perspective. So we've already had our introduction, but I would like to start by asking Carl and Nicole. And Carl, I'll start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about the College of Paramedics in Nova Scotia, just how big you are, some of your history, anything else that you think is relevant that sort of has brought you to this point.
Sure. So we are the statutory body. We're a statutory body corporate, which basically means that we must exist in order to regulate the practice of paramedicine in Nova Scotia. We came into existence on April 1st, 2017, and literally we came into existence on April 1st, 2017. There was nothing in place prior to us being here other than the regulator prior to us, which was Emergency Health Services Nova Scotia. On April 1st, we assumed responsibility for all registration, licensing, professional conduct decisions, anything to do with the practice in the province. We assumed it. When we did that, we inherited a system from Emergency Health Services Nova Scotia, from a database service provider that we utilized here. Since transitioning from EHS to the college, we now have a database that contains 1,900 registrants. When we started, we had 1,200 and some or so that actually transitioned into our database. So we're sitting at about 1,900 registrants. And annually, we'll see somewhere between 1,283, 1,263 of them renew their licenses. And then we'll have an additional 100 new registrants on an annualized basis, roughly give or take over the last few years. We've seen a little bit of a decrease in the number of new registrants over the last couple of years. We think that's probably related to COVID, like many other professions. And so that's generally the kind of numbers that we're looking at as far as registrants. One of the things that I'll point out is that that's a pretty good registrant population, I think. There's only 2.5 staff, and we only recently hired a deputy registrar back in August of this year. But basically for the last 6 years, 4 years, I guess Nicole joined us in 2019, 2018, 2019. Nicole and I have been the ones managing the processes within the college. So that's kind of a bit of a background on us as an entity.
Okay, that's great. Nicole, is there anything you wanted to add around?
Yeah, sure. We inherited a lot of information. I think that's really important to point out as well. So with all those registrants come a lot of information, and what we do with that information is really important, and how we access that information and retrieve that information and retain that information. And I think you guys are going to get into a little bit more of that shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's great. That helps provide some context, especially just around how relatively new CPNS is and some of the things that you had to do in terms of just creating processes from scratch, as opposed to having some legacy issues. You had legacy data, but not necessarily legacy processes or workflows. So I'd like to dive in a little bit more on that. So why was CPNS looking for an alternative to more traditional databases or member register management systems?
So maybe I'll start with that one.
Sure.
So one of the biggest reasons that drove us to looking around, and I'll be 100% clear, we were looking for almost 2 years. We were trying to figure out for a 2-year period what it was that we would do as a regulator to improve our processes in managing our data here. And the reason I say a 2-year period is because I had the opportunity to listen. We're part of a bigger network here in Nova Scotia. We're part of the Nova Scotia Regulated Health Professions Network, and sitting around that table is another 22 healthcare regulators in the province. So I've had the opportunity to speak with them or hear their pinch points for their different systems. I had the opportunity to hear about my counterparts from across the country and the experiences that they were having. Heard about a whole bunch of different database service providers and what they could do. And then knowing what it was that we wanted to do. And our key driver for this whole thing was flow. There didn't seem to be a database that was going to allow us to have our flow. Sure, we could capture the data, all the key things that we needed to have to report to government, whether it's CI-High or whether it's Nova Scotia Department of Health and Wellness here. We were able to capture all that data and we were able to report on it. But the problem was in capturing that data, there was no natural process for the database that we were working with to allow us to generate applications that gave us that smooth flow of information in. And if the information wasn't right, being able to send it back to the applicant to get them to do some stuff with it, to have it sent back in. So it was really about that flow. Like that was a big piece. The other big piece that I kept weighing in on, thinking about was our security. One of the questions I always had for our data service provider prior to moving to this system was, tell me about your security. Tell me about how it is that I know my data in your database is secure. And what I learned from that was that most database service providers will not really get into telling you about the security in their system, and for very legitimate reasons. They have processes that are in place to make sure their system is secure, and sharing that information with other parties is going to potentially put that security at risk. So while we could never really get a clear answer from the database service provider on how secure our data was in their system, and they would never let us do third-party challenges on it. So they wouldn't allow or do any type of third-party trying to get into the system and see if they could hack the system. So they wouldn't allow that kind of stuff. So in the data itself, Nicole mentioned that, and it kind of drove me a little bit crazy. Nicole would be going into the database and cleaning it up. Registrants would type with lowercase postal code letters, or they'll type lowercase names. And when we're pulling stuff out of the database, we're trying to push it somewheres, it would make our data look sloppy. It would make our letters look sloppy. If the registrant submitted their name with lowercase k instead of uppercase K, it just didn't look professional. And if the postal codes were all in lowercase, it just did not look professional. Nicole was going in and cleaning that up. And so that was a significant amount of time that was being taken away from our administrative processes to Nicole doing that work. And while it doesn't sound like a lot, the email to go to the registrant, the right information to come back, to put the information in, it just took a significant amount of time. So being able to have the data come in clean from the registrant, from the applicant, was one of the other key things that we wanted to make sure that we could do. And then there are other things within the system that just allowed us to do things a little more clearly for us on the way we wanted it, and a little more concise in the data that we actually captured. So that they were some of the big reasons that we went looking. And the one other reason that I'll say that I really learned over the time that I've been here is that when I'm talking to a database service provider, I'm talking to someone that knows data. I'm talking to a salesperson that knows data. I'm not talking to someone that knows flow. And one of the things that I kind of, took away from when we first met Rick and Cam was flow. Carl, what's your flow and how do you want this to go? And engaging with them was completely different from engaging with our previous service provider. Our previous service provider, it was like pulling teeth and trying to make them understand what it was that we wanted the system to do and for them to actually be able to implement it. Their system just seemed to be a little more rigid. And from what I hear about most systems, a little bit more rigid because they are databases owned with their processes, their flows. But that engagement with Rick and Cam is really kind of what drew me into them, because they heard us, they were listening to us, they were interpreting what we were saying, and they were trying to put it into place the way we needed to be put in place. So one of the other key things for me was I didn't want to talk to salespeople anymore. I didn't want to talk to database service manager. Like, I wanted to talk to someone that clearly understood what it was that we wanted to accomplish and to help us to get there. So there were kind of some of the real key reasons for why we started looking around.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carl. And yeah, definitely that workflow component seems to be a key theme. And so, Nicole, before we jump into the demo, is there anything you wanted to add, especially from where you sit? I think you have different drivers than Carl in his position. What are some of the things for you when you're looking at an alternative? What sticks out from you from that time frame around, if you had a wish list, you're like, oh, it sure would have been nice to be able to do these types of things.
Yeah, that's great. I think Carl covered off a lot of the really key things that we were looking for, and we're actually going to show you some of my favorite things shortly. So I
Okay,
think
so
I'll wait until we get there, and yeah, we'll talk about those in a minute.
Okay, sounds good. That sounds great. All right. So motivation, just to summarize some of the things we heard, is that customizable workflow is, created in the way that you want it, and the ability to adjust in the future as needed. Such a huge component is it's never going to be set it and forget it. You're always going to be updating and making changes. Flexible reporting. So that idea of if you have structured data and clean data coming in, your ability to automate letters, automate communication, but more importantly, be able to pull up a whole bunch of different reporting basically at your fingertips is really valuable, as opposed to having to download, manipulate data, get into Excel, and a short 6 hours later you have a report for whatever stakeholder is asking for it. That's like you said, Carl, it takes a lot of time. And then the ability for registrants to enter and revise their own information. So I think the benefit of registrants owning that process of them being able to go in and do what you want them to do, no more, no less. But also there's only 2.5 people there, and prior to that, even less, like 2 people at the college. So administratively, you have to be efficient in terms of not spending a bunch of time doing manual work. So a little bit of a summary. So I think from there, we're actually just going to dive right into the demonstration, and we'll continue to talk and ask questions. But I think it's helpful for everybody who's joined us today on the webinar to be able to start to actually look at it and see what this looks like in practice. And we'll spend the majority of the next 40 minutes doing that. And definitely want to encourage anybody, if you have questions, especially about anything specifically that you're seeing, please feel free to put it into the chat. Preference is actually just to answer questions as they come up if it's related to something we're looking at. Conversely, we can also wait till the end on questions, but just like we want it to be interactive with Carl and Nicole today and a conversation, we'd like to invite everybody who's on the call into that conversation as well, and you can do that through the chat. So I will turn it over to Lana, Carl, and Nicole and I'll jump in with any questions, but please fire away.
Yes, please. And as I share my screen and go through a bit of the demo, Carl, Nicole, Rick, please feel free to jump in and provide some of your feedback and experience as well. So we're going to start in the registrant portal. So this is a secure portal that registrants have access to that shows all of their basic information and also gives them access to some of the key forms that they need to submit to the college. Carl and Nicole have complete access to control which registrants have access to the portal, and they're able to go in and modify that as necessary. So as you'll see, we're just in the general tab here, and so this shows some of the basic information on the registrant's license. And over to the right-hand side here, we have some links to some of their key forms. One of the forms we're going to demo today is the verification of registration form. So the registrant can click on this link to request a verification of registration. And this form here will open for the registrant. The form will auto-populate with all the registrant's personal details that are in the system. So it saves them some time. They no longer have to go through and fill out these questions. We've pre-populated it for them. And then they just need to go through and complete some of the questions for the verification of registration. They can put some recipient information in here, special instructions. There's an acknowledgement piece, their signature. They have the option to select their payment method, and you can see here that their invoice amount is pre-populating as well. So once they have their form completed, they press submit, and this starts the workflow that we've been all mentioning. So once this submits, I'll show you a bit of the workflow there. Perfect. So this is CPNS's admin center, and it just helps them navigate to different spots within the system. So every single day, Nicole can come in here. She can click on her verification of registration forms, and it brings her into the form summary. So we can see we have 175 completed forms in here, but we also have 2 waiting for review. And this one here is the one that we just submitted together. So she's able to come into here, quickly see how many verifications of registration she needs to process. As she opens up this form, we can click back into the first step to see the full submission, see any instructions that were added, verify all those pieces. Then she can come in here, she can receive the payment piece. And I'll let Nicole talk a little bit more about the pass back here, because I think this is a great opportunity, Nicole, to talk a little bit more about the workflow.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Lana. So just to backtrack a tiny bit, every regulator, every organization, every college, every school has forms, right? You guys have paper, and a lot of people are sick of paper. This form was actually adapted from a pan-Canadian organization called the Canadian Organization of Paramedic Regulators. And there is something called the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, where people can move around to different provinces if you belong to certain professions and meet certain criteria. So these forms, the way to get information into our system, it's so much more than just a form. This form used to come to me in many formats and still does sometimes. I would get JPEGs, I would get pieces of paper, I would get stuff with coffee stains. I would get forms that I had to somehow figure out, reformat, communicate with a registrant or communicate with a new applicant and try to figure out how to make this form look professional, get it the way we need it, convert it. Then I can finally complete the request and send it off to another regulator. We don't do that anymore. So this was one of the first things, aside from our applications, that we had Pontem work with us on, because it was such an incredible time saver. What we were able to do, Lana actually did this for us. It was one of her first things. And we were able to take all the pieces of the form, all the pertinent information, populate it on the registrant side, and then we get it and we fill it out, and it takes about 5 clicks, and I'm able to download a PDF with both pages that the registrant has completed, I have completed, and I have a complete form that I'm able to give to another regulator that not only is professional, it's in the correct format, and all the pertinent information is there about a registrant's history. So this is huge for us. This was a game changer for us, and we'll never go back to paper. Let's just put it that way. Hopefully this kind of gives you the idea of how workflow would improve from getting things in the mail, things on your desk, a stack of sticky paper, to a form that is generated in just a few clicks. So one key point that Lana mentioned earlier is the ability to pass something back. Well, what does that mean? Well, sometimes someone holds a registration in Alberta and Nova Scotia, and I might have that information, but the registrant might misread the form, or they might just skim over it really quickly because, a lot of it is automated. So we have the ability to actually pass back an application if we receive it. So you'll see underneath registrar review there's something that says pass back, yes or no. It's really simple. I review what the registrant gave me. If there's something missing or something that needs attention, I can click no. And when I click no, it's going to select every possible option the registrant was able to fill out. And I can check off, hey, this needs attention, that needs attention, and then we can get this off to the other regulator for you. So within a few button clicks, I'm able to pass something back if it needs modifications. if something doesn't need modifications, I'm able to say, yes, this form looks good, send it off to the regulator. And we've taken a process that used to take snail mail and multiple manipulations of a document to about 3 minutes after the audit to get it all said and done. So in terms of time, it's a huge time saver, but we're going to talk about more of the process and the flow when we show you an initial registrant application, and then you'll really be able to see the nitty gritty and the beauty of the passback.
Yeah, and I'll show too, I'll demo quickly what Nicole was mentioning. So as we fill out the verification of registration form and Nicole enters the inputs, she has the ability to save the form here and actually generate a draft document. So now that I've clicked save, you can see that there is a draft Word document in here. So we can open that up. Just give me 2 seconds to sign in here. And you can see now that this form has been filled out with all the information from, oh, can you not see it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't think so. It's just the main.
I think I have it here. 2 seconds. Thank you, Rick.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
Yay. Yes, so as I was saying, you can now see that this form has been populated, pre-populated with all the information that was filled out in the first step, as well as some information that Nicole filled out within her part too. So you can see the registration number has pulled in, registration date, all this good information.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight, Carl had brought up that key piece around having structured data, like just make sure it's capitalized, make sure it's in the form that we want, so that these forms can actually, they don't have to be reviewed or edited, they can just go out as is. And one of the pieces with the workflow is that there's the ability to have the data coming in different ways, whether it's drop down boxes or mandatory date fields, whatever it might be. And that can all change over time. Like there's an evolution. Will this form look exactly the same 3 years from now? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But the ability to change that as needed is very it's very easy. It's a short process, and I think that provides confidence to CPNS around, well, whatever comes our way, we're going to be able to deal with without any difficulty. And it also frees CPNS to say, hey, you know what? Nobody's telling us we need to make a change, but we know that this is going to help improve our internal process. Or we've heard something from our registrants that this will make it a little bit easier for us. So registrants are stakeholders, and if you can do something to make their life easier, we can do it. And I think that's another key point, is that there's just the ability to constantly improve and evolve as you get smarter, just because you've had more experiences and you have processes are very rarely static. They're often changing in large and small ways.
Absolutely. And as Nicole mentioned, we're now going to show you an example of an initial registration application. So here is a test form that we've submitted, and I'll open this up. So right now we're in the college staff review step. So this is when the college has received the application and they're reviewing to ensure that the application is complete. Again, has the ability to click back into the application itself and see all the inputs and see what the registrant the applicant has entered. One of the things I'll mention too with this application is they do have the ability to change from application type. So there's no more separate forms, but you can choose whether you're a new graduate. You can choose whether you're a graduate from another jurisdiction. And you can choose whether you're an international international applicant. And the form will hide and show questions that are applicable to that application type. So really customizing it to the different applications for CPNS. As you come into the review step, I will kind of mention again what Nicole was mentioning with the passback here. So if you select no to pass it back to the registrant, let's say maybe something was incomplete, maybe they submitted a document that didn't meet requirements, as she selects no, she has the ability to select all these different reasons and really say, hey, you were missing your proof of identification. Maybe you had, a missing criminal record search. She also has the ability to really provide some additional information to the registrant on exactly what she needs or maybe what was missing. So she's able to type in additional comments. She can add some bullet lists to make it very clear on exactly what maybe is missing and what needs to be revised in the application. And Nicole, maybe I'll pause here and allow you to explain a little bit further as well.
Thanks, Lena. The passback feature is incredible. There's no other way to say it. The passback feature has kind of given us this ability to eliminate email threads, to eliminate paper mail, to eliminate redundancies in terms of time and process spent on trying to get information into this system. It's a really, really great way for applicants to edit their application. There's no more you submit an application, it goes into a black hole somewhere, and hopefully you hear back and you did everything right. We can actually talk to people right away and let them know. And what this was actually such a simple thing to implement, but it seems so like there's a lot there. So I just want to break it down quickly so you have an idea of what you're looking at. This is actually our checklist. It is a copy paste of our checklist for an initial registrant application. And like Lana was saying before, we have one application for initial registrants. We don't have several, and everything's dynamic and there's logic built into the form so it knows what spots to show and what spots not to show. And then this right here is literally everything that someone could possibly need to give us. So I quickly go through. Lana, if you could go back to the application for a sec and scroll down to the bottom so I can show them. Beautiful. I just want to show them where the uploads are. So these are like judicial questions and other stuff like that we have to review. But this right here, everyone uploads their own information. So they give us their documents and then we verify the document. And what I do is I usually have a couple of screens on the go here. And between talking to the applicant on email, getting an application, going through documents, getting some application in the mail, getting some stuff emailed to me, getting tiny, tiny pictures that I had to modify and do stuff with. This way, we get everything in one spot, and I'm able to very quickly go through it. Applications used to take around 2 hours to review, and now when I come in the morning, I can view an application in about 5 minutes and usually tell if something's missing in about 30 seconds. So that amount of time is just so invaluable because we can now use it in other places. So everything is here. So everything's in order. I can go through, see if it meets our criteria. And then, Lana, could you go back to part 7 for us for staff review? And then I quickly just toggle through the top to go through various steps. So after the registrant creates their profile, after they submit their application, it comes to us. But you see, there's also things there in the flow, and it's because we put them there. So this application is now in our driver's seat when we're in part 7, but we have the ability to pass this back to the applicant or pass it back to the registrant and say, hey, you need to give us these things. And this is communicated via email very clearly. And it's also time-stamped, so we can make sure that we're in line with our fair registration and practices guidelines and make sure that we're accountable to our commitment to processing things in a timely manner. And now we also have a record of, if there's any kind of delay, what that delay might have been. And that also helps us because now we can look at things and we can actually analyze, oh, you know what? A lot of people are submitting this incorrectly. How can we maybe make that a little better? Or what is about that item that might be unclear? So it's really, really helpful as a tool to kind of look at things that we never could have imagined before. And that's all thanks to the passback functionality.
Maybe I'll just jump in here just right quick too and just mention that this is where that whole flow and process thing comes into play. And in the initial discussions that we had with Pontem and the development of this platform, one of the things I was saying is I need these application forms. And the very first thing that Cam came back to me with was, why do you need all these different applications forms? Give me what's the purpose? Well, it's my initial registration licensure applicants. I need to have them flowing properly. And really and truly, this is the part that I really enjoyed about working with Pontem, is that we walked through what it was that we needed, and we walked through the logical sense of what that would look like, and that is what was produced here. And the challenge for me with the other database service provider that we had been with was they could not give this to us. They couldn't even give us really multiple applications. I had to use one basic application for making everything work within the structure of what we wanted to do. But as I was looking at the ability to report on different things and to gather appropriate information, it didn't make sense for us to be locked into something that didn't have that ability, that flexibility for us to flow. So, this is the initial registration licensure application, absent from practice, expired license, initial, new to practice. This system was so good, we added in during COVID, we had to add in, probably getting ahead of ourselves here, but we had to add in the paramedic graduate. We never had a restricted temporary license for paramedic graduate. And I think within 2 weeks, we had our paramedic graduate application up and running because it just flowed naturally out of this a little bit different, but it flowed naturally from this, and we were able to adapt it. So from a business perspective and just managing business, which is kind of what I do here as well. It's not just the registrarial stuff. It's like making operations work, being able to talk it through with Nicole, being able to talk it through with Cam and Rick and Lana when she got here. We're able to talk those things through. I really need to emphasize that it's the ability to talk to someone that understands process, not just data. Because I talked with that other service provider, I always talked to a the person that understood the database, how the database worked, but they didn't understand how to make it flow for us. And for clarity, probably should say this, I got no relationship with Pontem. I know Rick is out in Alberta. I'm over on the East Coast. We have no connection in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying all this stuff because I truly believe what this system has done for us has really improved our ability to operate and function here. So that's why I'm so happy to talk about it to anybody that wants to ask. So I just want to reemphasize the full, again, from this form is not just one it's multiple parts of things that we need to report on, and it captures it just the way we need it to.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate those thoughts, both Carl and Nicole, because I think that one thing I'm interested in is also the evolution. I don't know when the right time will be to talk about it during the demo, but I'm curious around just how you guys have seen things evolve over the couple of years that we've worked together, right? Because it's like where we started isn't necessarily where we ended up, right? And I think that's a positive, because as you go through, and Carl, you highlighted, like, well, why are we doing it this way? Is there a slightly better way, given that the tool is more flexible and we have some options? What if we could just, not do whatever we want, but within a much larger box of constraints? Hey, what is it that we can do? So I was curious, Lana and Nicole, if you guys had an example of something that maybe evolved a little bit over time, or you guys had sort of went back to a couple times to get it right, because I think that's also the nature of process and workflow, is that it is such a great candidate for continuous improvement. I think there's some interesting stories there sometimes. So
Nicole, I saw your eyes go very wide with excitement, so maybe I'll let you start.
It's the activity log. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you have that off, Lana, but this was my birthday present. The activity log was a dream that we had, and the activity log is basically a repository. It's a living repository of everything we have on a registrant. So that's data we inherited from before, that, papers, PDFs, whatever. it is all applications that have come in since Pontem has been around. It's everything that we've received via FlowForma. Our applications are filled out through FlowForma, through forms, and they live in this activity log. And the activity log is just incredible. It's basically like an encyclopedia on a registrant, and it's everything we need at our fingertips. So one of the things Rick said to me very early on, and I didn't really get it until we started working with Pontem, was that the information will come to us with this new registrant system. We won't go looking for it. And I think the activity log is kind of a platinum example of what that work really meant and what that turned into. And I don't know if you're able to bring up an example maybe for red salmon or something, Lana, so we can show them an activity log, but it's really one of my favorite parts.
Just need to share a different window.
Yeah, that's no worries.
Yeah.
It's actually, yeah, like it's almost documentation of the conversation
Perfect.
you have with each individual registrant, right? Like, and I think that's an interesting piece is we talk about each, although there's consistency in terms of standardized registrations, the reality is each individual registrant does have their own story. And the communication piece, not only that you're tracking, but we need to be able to go back at any point. You never know when you're going to get an email or a phone call from a registrant saying, hey, this is happening. I need, can you help me with this? And I imagine if your top 10 most unique things come up each year, they're not things you necessarily would have predicted or you wouldn't have known at the start of the year. So having the ability to go back and look at this and be like, okay, where are we at? How do we handle this? At least in our experience with regulatory colleges, that seems to be such an important piece. So hopefully I've summarized that. Is that a fair statement, Nicole, in terms of how I described that?
Yeah. I think one thing too is our ability to look at not only the individual, but the group. So for those data lovers out there, that's key. Like we have the flexibility to look at things on a time series basis, but we also have the flexibility to look at a group. We also have the ability to look within groups. We have the ability to look at one person or multiple people. Like it's a game changer. And this registrant lookup here, just to show you a few examples, each row here is something. So the row could be a verification or registration request. The row could be a note that college staff had to put in there. A row could be a name change. A row could be a renewal application. And what we have is a wholesome view of everything this registrant has ever done with us. And we can pull some of this out for reporting. Some of it's internal, some of it's unique, some of it's not. But what it is this is where I go for information when I'm filling out that verification or registration that Lana showed earlier. Everything is right here. And not only is it right here, I can actually go in and there's different levels of information here. I can actually click. And with one click, I have their full application, all of their documents, everything. If I need to go back and audit something, or if they need something, or if someone else needs something, everything is here. And I think that is something we can never live without ever again. And it's a huge time saver, but I think also just in terms of organization, and it's something that's working for us. We're not working for it works for us. And I think that is really, at the end of the day, the most important part of this system and what I love about it.
And I keep back to the dashboard reporting just because I want to highlight, you can see at the top there where it says activity, each of those buttons, reviews, employment, education, continuing competency, are all things that can be clicked on and would have information. And the other thing that is really nice is because the data is coming into with these interactive forms and getting stored in a structured way, the reporting for different regulatory colleges looks quite different, or can look quite different, just because of different needs or desires in terms of the organization strategy, like the regulatory college's strategy versus maybe what the government needs, because you're in a different province. And so this is all very flexible, this reporting. It can be updated and changed. And I think this is a great example where I think when we first started, we didn't have nearly as many. You can see on the left, we have, I don't know how many reports we're up to now, dashboard pages, let's say over 50. And we started with 10, and we had always said, listen, this is gonna evolve and grow as you have different needs. And I know this activity lookup piece for registrants was something Nicole had always wanted. And I think for us, we kept coming back and being like, okay, are we getting closer? And she's like, you're getting closer, but let's keep going and let's keep going. And that evolution landed in a spot where, Nicole can talk about it as a birthday present and a positive one, which is nice. And it'll always continue to evolve. But I think that level of partnership and going back and forth is really important and provides a lot of value. And we're really lucky, I should say, that Carl and Nicole are very forthcoming with their needs and come forward with ideas, right? Around like, hey, can we do this? What about this? And that's a great spot to be in, because now we're having a conversation about like, okay, what is the most efficient way to do this? How would you use it? Whether that's from a workflow or a reporting perspective. Okay, so let's keep going, I guess. Lana, was there anything else that you really was important to show, or Nicole, that you guys wanted to highlight?
I think that was it. That's hopefully that gives everybody a really good. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Hopefully that gives everybody a little bit of insight to CPNS's system.
Sure.
Gives you a little tip.
I think that's really great. And Carl, I have a question for you, because we had talked a little bit about having this data and the ability to actually look at it from a business perspective. And for an example was around delineating application fees, for example, around like, well, what was the cost of actually doing this many applications per year, and what's our fee, and what's the true cost of this? And there's some more insight because the data was coming in and you could see it more clearly, and you're like, oh, okay, so I'm not sure what level of detail you want to get into, but I thought that was interesting in terms of like, oh, we could see our business, our organization in a new, more detailed light.
Well, one of the challenges that we had with the previous database was that we could only accept a fee. So when an applicant submitted an application form, we incorporated into that fee that we charged them both an application fee and a registration and licensing fee. And we couldn't, the way the system was set up previously, we couldn't delineate what the application fee was from the registration and licensing fee. It was a challenge to do refunds. Like everything was just a challenge about it. And it actually created more work, because if someone was in the application process and they had paid $500, let's say, for an application fee, or sorry, for the full fee, we would have to do a refund of the registration and licensing fee to hold on to the application fee. And Nicole knows that was a pretty painful process when we had applicants doing that. As we've been working with the system, one of the things that we've been able to clearly do is say, okay, you filled out your application, we're going to look at your application. You're going to pay an application fee. Our application fee currently is $150. And then once you pay that application fee, if we accept your application, we're going to give you 30 days to pay for your licensing fee as well. And so you got 30 days to decide, yeah, I'm going to license with the college, or I'm not going to license with the college, and you pay your licensing fee. So we can see them as two very distinct and clear fees now. One of the things that we aim to do here is to ensure that our fees are not overtaxing on the applicant. So when I say the fees, I mean the application fee. So we shouldn't be charged. We should just basically be charging enough to cover off our administrative costs. And when I did it, we just incorporated this in the last year or so. It's been a year and a bit now that we've been doing this with Pontem. So it's only in the last little bit that we were able to actually capture a year's worth of data. And that year's worth of data said to me, so Nicole and myself as the administrative staff, the staff of the college, and now deputy registrar, $20,000 is all we charge for our application fees. That doesn't even come close to covering off the fees that, the costs that are associated with processing these applications. So it was just, and we only really kind of saw this number in the last 6 months or so, because we had that annualized data. But I'm able to now clearly see what our application fees are that we've brought in for revenue, and do an analysis against, should we be charging more for the application fee? So that was one of the key things that this data has been able to show us is from a business process side of things, we've been able to see that much clearer.
Great. Yeah, it's a great story and a great example of how, having a full year and doing things consistently, you can start to say, oh, okay, how close were we? Like your gut feeling might have been like, yeah, maybe this is an issue. And then you actually get to see it up front with exact numbers and be like, okay, that's what I thought, but now I can prove it. Now I know why and how.
Yeah, and the challenge was, Rick, we couldn't even see if it was an issue. We could not easily delineate what the information that was coming in, and without having to go back and do all the numbers ourselves, like to actually do it and really kind of physically see it on a income on a statement, very clear. This is what we're bringing in for revenue under this number. So it just really helps to clearly demonstrate some of the business processes for us and what we need to do to improve even some of them.
Exactly. Okay, well, so I'll ask anybody who's watching if you do have any questions. Now's definitely a time to put them in. We do have some additional questions though that we can ask. So I'll start with sort of pulling out a little bit around. I'm just curious around the importance of flexibility in the member registrant system, given the evolving requirements for a healthcare regulatory college. And I mean, maybe this ties in a little bit around, since 2017, how many changes you've seen in terms of expectations and requirements for CPNS?
Well, listen, there's constant, we've only been around for 6 years, but since I've been here, there's been a constant ongoing discussion about what's going to happen within the healthcare system here. Patient Access to Care Act was introduced back in March of this year. That placed a requirement on all healthcare regulators not to charge any application fees to anybody that's a labor mobility applicant. I think that took about a half an hour of Pontem's time and maybe $100 to put the process in place that we needed in order to remove that fee. So, the Patient Access to Care Act is a driver that's making us do things a little bit differently. That's just one example. The paramedic graduate license, I had mentioned that earlier, where COVID put us in a position where we introduced a new restricted temporary type of license with processes in around that. We actually put a process in place for someone who was applying for a restricted temporary license to support the healthcare system during COVID, an expedited process for them to come back. And we put all the mechanisms in place for that. So it seems to be, in my time period of being here for 6 years, we're constantly evolving. And most recently, the government of Nova Scotia has introduced the Regulated Health Professions Act. And the Regulated Health Professions Act, not introduced, it's passed, it's now legislation, and we're under that for certain components now. But we're working on building out the regulations around what we need to do for next year. And so what I know is that there's flexibility in this system for it to adapt to whatever that change is going to be. When we worked with the other database service provider, the cost just for little things seemed just to be so significant, because they had to go in and make significant changes to their database. I guess, I don't know. But for us, it's a flow process. It's just a matter of managing that flow. And I want to just reemphasize too that it is our data. I know Rick mentioned that earlier. It is our data. When we moved from the old database to this database, we had to pay a fee to get our data. And most database service providers, from what I understand, do that. Well, and you have to work it around them, and then you're at their whim of what they will do for you if you're moving away from them. So I think that was another key thing. But yeah, we're having constant evolution here, it seems to be, in 6 years, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. So it's that, again, going back to that flexibility of the system.
Yeah, it does seem like that pace of change isn't going to be decreasing over time. Just especially with things like COVID and the nature of it. So maybe, I know we maybe have a minute and a half left here before we have to turn it back to Ursula. So I'll just ask one other question around, some of the dashboard reporting, how that's helped your organizations, or maybe your ability to communicate with stakeholders. And just just curious if you have any stories or examples where that's been something that's been helpful.
Nicole uses this a lot, so I'll let Nicole.
Yeah, I think just bringing it back to information being brought to us not having to look for information. accountability, timelines, security. We get a lot of sensitive information being a healthcare regulator, and sometimes the public has to bring us information, and making sure that everything is in a safe place and it can be accessed when we need it. And it's changed everything. And I mean, as Carl mentioned, our application fees, it doesn't cover our administrative costs, but now that we can work so quickly, it certainly does help. In terms of it being user friendly, I mean, there's no tutorial that goes along with our system. We know how to use it because it's ours, and we built it together with Pontem using FlowForma's tools. So I think at the end of the day, it was a game changer for us. So thank you for taking the time to let us talk about it today.
Well, that's great. I know we have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ursula to wrap up. But I do want to thank Carl and Nicole for being so candid and willing to share your experiences and both positive and negatives around where you were and where you're going. So this was fantastic. Thank you. And Lana, thank you for doing the demonstration. So Ursula, over to you.
Thank you so much, guys. Wow, that was really inspiring. Even working for FlowForma myself, I still am inspired by our customers every day. And Nicole and Carol and Lana and Rick, what you've done has just been fantastic. And, it's great to see, real life dashboards and, actually seeing the process in play. So thank you so much for sharing that. We just have a couple of minutes left. If anyone does have any questions, last minute questions, if they want to get them in, we can try squeeze them in at the end if needed. Or if they do come in too late, we will definitely pass them over to our speakers and we will send you an email back with a response. Or maybe we'll put it through FlowForma. No emails allowed. But just to quickly wrap up, a little bit of information about FlowForma. So you've seen the FlowForma tool, you've seen the amazing work that Rick and Lana from Pontem do, and how Nicole and Carl have shared their story. But we are a no-code process automation solution in the business process management space. We help hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. I'll quickly share, a couple of our customers. So you can see we range from construction, healthcare, education, financial services, manufacturing. The list really does go on. So process automation is for everyone. It doesn't have to be a scary topic. Hearing someone talk about reporting as a birthday present really is a mind changer, I think. So definitely don't be too afraid to start. I think that's a message that we always like to share. And before we finish for today, just some next steps. If you're wondering, where do you start? There is a survey that you can fill out. Give us some feedback. We would love to hear from you. You can always request a free trial. So if you go onto the FlowForma website /trial and fill in your details there, you can play around within the tool itself, see what it can actually do. And what we will do as a next step is follow up with Rick and his team and see how they can support you. We also have a case study that CPNS have kindly worked with FlowForma with, so you can download that from the resource panel as well. But we really look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. And thank you again to our speakers. That was a brilliant session. And I'm sorry the time flew in so quickly and we didn't get to maybe cover off as much as we would have liked. But if you do have any questions for our speakers, please send us a message. We'd be happy to pass that information on. But I would like to thank you all for joining and thank you again to our speakers.